All right, so today we're going diving deep into Rabindranath Tagore.
Ooh, Tagore.
You know him.
Oh, yeah, I love Tagore.
So we're looking at nationalism, specifically, a collection of essays that he wrote back in 1917.
Wow.
And
back in 1917, okay.
yeah, so we're going way back. But you know what's so interesting is that his ideas on what it means to be a nation are surprisingly relevant, even today.
I think that's what's so cool about looking at some of these older texts, right? It's like you think, oh, this is, so long ago, this won't apply to me. And then you read it and you're like, oh my gosh.
Yeah.
This is like, it's the same.
It's like he was, yeah, it's like he was looking into the future.
Yeah.
And especially for a country like India, with its own complex history.
Absolutely. And I think what's fascinating is how he compares nationalism in the West.
Yes.
Japan and India, it's like he's piecing together this global puzzle.
A puzzle, yeah.
And his observations, they feel so timely, even though they're over a century old.
I know. It's why,
it's like
especially with everything that's happening now.
Oh, yeah, with rising nationalistic sentiments
right.
and, the anxieties that come with that.
Exactly.
It's like he had a sixth sense about where we were headed.
Yeah. I was really struck by that, too, like when I was reading these essays.
Yeah.
For example, in his essay on nationalism in the West, he uses this really stark image of Western nations as a pack of hungry wolves.
A pack of hungry wolves.
Constantly seeking power and profit.
Wow.
He even goes so far as to call Western nationalism a form of political and economic exploitation.
That's powerful. And it's so true when you think about it, like the history of colonialism.
Yeah.
And the way that, certain nations have exerted their power over others. It's all about, resources and control.
All about who has the most and who can get more.
Exactly.
It's not really about the people.
And that's really what Tagore was concerned about, right? He was deeply troubled by how the West prioritized material progress and efficiency over human values.
Over the human aspect of it, yeah.
Yeah, and spiritual growth.
Right.
He felt like their systems of governance had become almost machine-like.
Like a factory.
Yeah, prioritizing order and control, often at the expense of individual freedom.
And that control aspect is really interesting because he doesn't just describe it. He really digs into the consequences of this mindset.
Right, like what happens when we prioritize efficiency over everything else?
Exactly. He argues that this relentless pursuit of material gain, it comes at a cost.
There's always a cost, right?
Yeah, it's like we're building a dam blocking the natural flow of human connection and spiritual development.
That's such a good analogy.
He even compares the nation to a machine governing from this disdainful distance.
Detached.
Yeah, completely detached from the everyday lives of the people.
And this is where I think we start to see a thread connecting his critiques of Western nationalism to what he observed in India.
Ooh, that's interesting.
Tagore was really worried that this Western model, with its focus on power and dominance, would be a dangerous import for India. He was worried it would actually make things worse.
Yeah, because it would exacerbate the divisions that already existed in Indian society.
Exactly. The caste system, religious tensions, economic disparities.
Right.
He felt like a narrow Western-style nationalism would just pour fuel on the fire.
So even though he's writing specifically about the West, we can already see those concerns kind of foreshadowing his thoughts on Indian nationalism, which we'll get to a little bit.
Exactly. It's all connected. It makes you wonder, is there a way to reconcile these different perspectives?
Right.
Can a nation be both powerful on the world stage and still prioritize those human values?
And can you have progress without sacrificing your soul?
Your essence, your culture.
Yeah.
That's the question.
Those are some big questions.
Big questions.
And I think Tagore grapples with them throughout these essays.
Yeah.
But before we dive into his critique of Indian nationalism, let's turn to his perspective on Japan.
Okay, Japan.
Nationalism in Japan. And here we see a totally different tone, a sense of admiration for how Japan managed to kind of embrace Western modernization while still maintaining its unique cultural identity.
Right. It's like they threaded the needle somehow.
Yeah, it's like they found this...
They found a balance.
Yeah, this balance, this middle path. And he sees Japan as a potential model.
A model? Interesting.
Yeah, a nation that successfully navigated this tension between tradition and modernity.
I like that.
He uses this beautiful image of Japan as a lotus blossom.
Ooh, I love that image.
Emerging from the east, symbolizing this harmonious blend of old and new.
It's beautiful, and it's so evocative, right? The lotus
Yes, it is.
Rising from the mud.
Yeah.
It's this symbol of purity and resilience.
And he specifically contrasts Japan's reverence for nature with the West's more exploitative approach.
Right.
So he sees that there's a deeper connection to spiritual values in Japanese culture, even as they're embracing all these technological advancements.
Right. They haven't lost their soul in the process.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But and this is crucial even in his admiration for Japan.
Okay.
He issues a warning.
Uh-oh.
He cautions against blindly imitating the West.
Right.
Right. And he urges Japan to forge its own path, rooted in those human values, and resist the allure of what he calls organized selfishness.
Organized selfishness. I love that phrase.
It's so good. It's like he's saying, learn from the West. Yes, but don't lose your soul in the process.
Don't become them.
Yeah.
Don't lose what makes you unique.
So we see this recurring theme, right? This balance, this middle path between the extremes of Western materialism and blind adherence to tradition.
It's finding that sweet spot, right?
Yeah, and it makes me think about how relevant this is to India's own journey
Absolutely.
of development and modernization. Can India learn from both the West and the East?
That's the big question.
Forging its own unique path that honors its cultural heritage?
While embracing progress?
Yes.
It's a tough one.
It is a tough one. And I think that's one of the key questions that Tagore is posing in these essays.
Yeah.
He's not offering any easy answers.
No.
But he's pushing us to think critically.
To really think.
About what kind of future we want to create.
For ourselves and for our nations.
Both.
Yeah.
Yeah, now I'm really curious to hear what he has to say about nationalism in India.
Me too. Especially considering those warnings about the dangers of blindly following the West.
That's coming up next.
It's really fascinating how Tagore's concerns about the West, their materialistic approach to progress. It's like that resonates with how careful Japan was being.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
It's like he saw the potential problems with modernizing too quickly.
Right.
And he was saying like, hey, don't forget what really makes a nation strong.
Yeah, what's important.
The people mentality, the values.
Yeah, absolutely.
But then when we get to Tagore's views on India, things get even more interesting.
Oh, yeah. This is where it gets really juicy.
Yeah, naturalism in India, this is where we see him kind of going against the popular opinions of his time.
Yeah, he was kind of a rebel in a way.
Yeah, he was. Remember, this is when India is under British rule, and the fight for independence is really heating up.
Right, everyone's fired up.
Everyone wants freedom.
Yeah.
There's this huge wave of nationalistic feeling.
So what did Tagore think about all that?
Well, he kind of throws a wrench in the works.
Oh, really?
He actually calls out Indian nationalism as something borrowed from the West.
Interesting.
Yeah, and he says it's not the right fit for India.
Like trying to force a square peg into a round hole.
Exactly. He even says that India's real problems aren't political. They're social.
So he's saying that mimicking the West would be a big mistake.
A huge mistake.
Yeah.
He's basically saying, hold on, everyone. Let's not get carried away with this Western-style nationalism.
He's like, we need to look deeper.
Yeah. Let's fix the root of the problem, not just the symptoms.
I like that. So what did he see as the root of the problem?
Well, he saw all the divisions in Indian society, the caste system, the religious tensions, the economic disparities.
Those are huge issues.
And he felt that this narrow Western-style nationalism would just make them worse.
It's like pouring gasoline on a fire.
It is. And it's a really bold stance for him to take at that time.
Yeah, especially with the political climate being what it was.
He's basically challenging the whole independence movement.
But at the same time, he's pushing for a better understanding of what it really means to be a nation.
For India in particular.
Exactly. He's not rejecting the idea of a nation. He's redefining it.
Yeah. So instead of focusing on power and dominance, which is like the Western model of nationalism,
right,
he's emphasizing India's history of tolerance, inclusivity, and spiritual unity.
He even uses the term spiritual unity to describe what he wants for India.
And what does that mean exactly?
It's a unity that goes beyond all those superficial divisions.
Like caste and religion.
Exactly. It's about embracing the richness of all the different cultures and traditions in India.
So instead of thinking of India as this strict nation state with borders and a focus on power, he's proposing something more fluid, more connected.
More like a tapestry.
Yeah, a nation where people are united by their shared humanity and a common purpose.
That's a beautiful idea. But was it realistic?
That's the question, right? Was he just being idealistic?
Could this actually work in a country as diverse and complex as India?
It's definitely something to think about. And it's interesting to see how his vision might play out in the world today.
Yeah, with all the globalization and the tension between national identity and global citizenship.
We see this push and pull all over the world.
It's like we're still trying to figure out how to balance those things.
And you could even see some of Tagore's concerns reflected in the debates we have today about immigration and multiculturalism.
Right, and the rise of identity politics.
It's like we're still asking the same questions he was asking over 100 years ago.
How do we have diversity and unity at the same time?
Exactly. How do we build societies that are both inclusive and cohesive?
And that's where Tagore's focus on spiritual unity becomes really important.
Tell me more about that.
It's not about forcing everyone to have the same religion or beliefs. It's about cultivating this deeper sense of connection, realizing that we're all part of something bigger than ourselves.
It's about finding that common ground.
That shared humanity that helps us overcome our differences.
And work together for the greater good.
Exactly. But how do we actually do that in a world that seems so polarized and divided?
That's the million-dollar question.
Tagore would probably say it starts with education.
Makes sense.
Teaching people to think critically, to be empathetic, to see things from other people's perspectives.
So it's about raising a generation that's not just focused on their own self-interest.
Right.
But who can see the bigger picture and understand how everything's connected.
Exactly. It's a big challenge, but it's worth striving for.
It is. And Tagore would say, this isn't just about India.
This is a global issue.
This is of the whole world.
We need to find ways to cultivate this spiritual unity on a global scale if we want a future that's peaceful and sustainable.
So it sounds like Tagore's critique of nationalism, both in the West and in India, is pointing us towards this idea of going beyond those narrow national identities.
Transcending those limitations.
Yeah, and embracing a wider vision of human unity.
Exactly. It's a beautiful vision.
But how do we put that into practice?
How do we actually make it happen?
What can India or any other nation learn from Tagore's ideas to create a better future?
Well, that's where things get really interesting because Tagore wasn't just a critic, he was also a visionary. He actually offered some concrete suggestions for how India could move forward in a way that was both modern and true to its heritage.
Okay. I'm really interested to hear about those suggestions, and I bet our listeners are too. So we've talked about Tagore's critiques of the West and his worries about India following the same path, and it seems like he really valued this spiritual unity, which sounds pretty radical, in a world that's so focused on power and looking out for number one.
Yeah, it is a radical idea, especially back then in the early 1900s. But Tagore really believed that India's true strength wasn't about copying the West. It was about tapping into its own heritage, all that spiritual wisdom and cultural diversity.
I'm curious to hear more about how he thought India could do that. What was his plan? What did he actually suggest?
Well, he had a few ideas. First, education was super important to him. He thought education should teach people to think for themselves, to be empathetic, and to really appreciate India's unique traditions. He didn't want education to just be about memorizing facts or getting a job. It was about developing well-rounded people who felt connected to themselves and their community.
That makes a lot of sense. It's like he's saying you can't build a strong, unified nation without strong, compassionate individuals.
Exactly. And Tagore was also big on self-reliance and revitalizing villages. He didn't think true progress would come from just copying the West with all their industries in big cities. Instead, he wanted to empower villages, encourage local businesses, and promote sustainable farming. He thought that would not only strengthen India economically, but also preserve its culture and sense of community.
So it's not about rejecting progress or technology completely. It's about finding a way to use them in a way that aligns with India's values and traditions.
Right. He was also really passionate about dialogue and understanding between different religions. He saw India's diversity as a strength, not a weakness. He felt like having those conversations between different faiths was essential for building bridges and recognizing our shared humanity.
It's interesting how he ties that idea of interfaith harmony to his vision of spiritual unity. It's not about erasing differences, but about finding that common thread that connects us all.
Absolutely. And lastly, Tagore believed India had a special role to play on the world stage. He imagined an India that wasn't driven by greed or power, but by peace, justice, and understanding. He saw India with its history of nonviolence and spiritual seeking as a beacon of hope for everyone.
That's an inspiring vision. But thinking about it now, over 100 years later, do his ideas still hold up? Are they still relevant today?
I think they're more relevant than ever. We're facing so many of the same problems that Tagore saw: rising nationalism, environmental destruction, social inequality, and a growing sense of spiritual emptiness. His call for a more humane approach to development, one that focuses on spiritual growth alongside material progress and emphasizes how interconnected we all are, it just feels incredibly timely.
So what can India or any nation really learn from Tagore's work?
I think he reminds us that true progress isn't just about money or technology. It's about cultivating compassion, empathy, and understanding. It's about recognizing that we're all connected and that our actions have far-reaching consequences. It's about embracing our differences and finding unity in our shared humanity.
That's a powerful message, and it really resonates with me. It's not about rejecting the modern world or living in the past. It's about moving forward in a way that honors our values and creates a more just and compassionate world for everyone.
Exactly. And while Tagore was talking about India, his ideas apply to everyone everywhere. They offer a blueprint for a new kind of global citizenship, one that's rooted in understanding our interconnectedness and taking responsibility for each other and our planet.
This has been an amazing deep dive into Tagore's nationalism. It's incredible how relevant his words still are after all this time.
I know, it's amazing how much wisdom he packed into those essays.
His insights really challenge us to rethink our ideas about progress, about what it means to be a nation, and even what it means to be human. They give me hope that a more just, compassionate, and sustainable world is possible.
Me too. It's a vision worth striving for.
Well, thank you for joining us on this journey into Rabindranath Tagore's nationalism. We hope you've learned something new and maybe even feel inspired to explore his work further.
We'll see you next time.